Hello, scholars. Here is our work today in our packet for Balto of the Blue Dawn, Chapter 7. Vocabulary words for today. Eventually. Eventually means in the end, usually after a series of problems in a story, right? In the classroom, we could think of it as eventually we will be going to recess, right? It means in the end, later, after a series of other things we're going to do, right? Eventually. If you think of some fairy tales, right? Eventually, there's a happily ever after, right? In the end, after a series of problems, eventually something happens, right? At the end. Taught. This is a different kind of taught than I have taught school for many years. This kind of taught means pulled or stretched tightly. There's no slack. If you have a jump rope and a friend is holding the other end and you pull it as tightly as you can, it's pulled taut, right? It's not loose and ready for twirling for jump roping. Or if you've ever participated in a tug of war, right? Each side is pulling as hard as it can. That rope is taut, right? There's no slack to it as each side is pulling. Taut. You can imagine, right, that dogs on a dog sled team, that gang line is pulled taut as they're running, right, pulling the sled. Bitterly is our third word. Bitterly means to an extreme or harsh degree. So if you think about it being bitterly cold outside, right, it means extremely cold, harshly cold, bitterly. And then I see we have a little typo here. Word for, there isn't a five. Word for is gale force. So, gale force is a very strong wind, often doing damage to buildings and trees, right? So, if you've heard of a gale at sea, right, it's a strong wind, a strong wave. Gale forced winds are strong winds. Strong winds certainly can happen during a blizzard. And think of the weather Jack and Annie are dealing with right now, right? Gale force winds. All right, let's continue. So today's reading of chapter 7, this is the time where you should pause your video, this video, and click to open the video of the read aloud to hear me and follow along with chapter 7, or pause this video for right now and read chapter 7 with someone or to yourself. Press pause now. All right, if you are playing this video again, it means you have read or listened to chapter 7 and are ready to work in your packet with me. All right, scholars, page 17 here for our chapter 7 work. We are going to work on two of the read for details questions. There's one right here at the top and one down here at the bottom that we're going to do. This first one we're going to do together because it's a little tricky because there's actually two answers. What did Ed say will be replacing sled dogs in Alaska? And it's kind of tricky for our brains because we're used to circling one answer, but there's actually two different things he said would replace sled dogs. Take a moment. Can you figure out which two? He talked about cars and small airplanes. Perhaps you went back into the chapter, right, and found information right toward the beginning of the chapter. He talked about it at the bottom of page 73 and the top of page 74. He mentioned small airplanes and cars as being what would replace sled dogs. Then, at the bottom of this page, what is the medicine made of that is used to kill diphtheria? So the medicine that is going to kill the diphtheria, right, that they're waiting for. Do you remember what it's made of? It was mentioned in the chapter. I'm going to give you two letters. So, an animal, horse, blood. Do you remember that from the chapter? That's important, right? Okay. Then, readers, that's going to leave you this read for detail question to do on your own, and then this vocabulary question right here. Now, this vocabulary question, right, has to do with delicious. So, right, what's something that means the same as delicious? Maybe think of a food that you think is delicious. And what would be another way of describing that food instead of the word delicious? That means the same. That's a synonym. Then an antonym remembers the opposite. So if you don't think the food is delicious, right, what would be the opposite of that? Okay, so that's those two. Then let's continue. We're also going to look at our figurative language down here at the bottom, mostly because we have not worked a whole lot with figurative language since we read the one and only Ivan. So we're going to jump back down here on page 18. Write the type of figurative language used in the following chapter 7 excerpt. Like sand in a sandstorm. Ice crystals beat against his face, stinging his skin. So scholars, this word is the key, right? Like sand in a sandstorm. So it's comparing, right, sand in a sandstorm to ice crystals, right? So think about how sand, right, would hit you if you were in a sand, like if you're in somewhere where it's really windy and there's sand, right? The sand kind of pelts at you. That's what's happening with these ice crystals. So this word like, comparing sand and ice crystals, do you remember which of these is comparing two things using the word like or the word as? You got it. It's a simile. A simile compares two things using like or as. Then, readers, you have a question to work on here. Reread to clarify. Right? So, if you're not sure what happened, right, reread before you pick that answer. Reflect. Can you remember what happened there, what their wish was? Then there's a vocabulary question. Scholars, go back to the beginning of this video, right? Pause at the video, or sorry, at the vocabulary, and what's the meaning of taught? Then you also have page 19 on this one. So there's another vocabulary question, right? So two of them related to vocabulary. You'll find helpful words, right, at the beginning of this video. Then reflect, why, explain. So your answer should have the word because in it. And a prediction question right here. So scholars, today's work has 3 pages that you're going to submit when you're finished. You need to submit 17, 18, and 19. So it's a 3-page assignment with today's work on chapter 7. So again, scholars, your homework now is to finish the chapter 7 work in your packet. Remember, that means you are completing pages 17, 18, and 19. Once all those questions are finished, take a photo of each of those 3 pages and submit photos of pages 17, 18, and 19. I should be able to see your answers to all 3 pages. Thank you.